Something you might commonly hear is people saying, well, I'm not sure scientists know enough about climate change yet. We might want to wait for them to collect some more data or find out some new information before we decide to take action. But what I want to make really clear is that, in fact, scientists have understood the science of climate change for well over 150 years. So back in 1856, Eunice Newton Foote was doing some of the earliest experiments with carbon dioxide, one of the primary pollutants in our atmosphere. And she began to see that if carbon dioxide was added to the atmosphere, it could change our climate. And in fact, it could warm our climate. A few decades later, savant Arrhenius started to produce the first calculations of what humans adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere might actually do for our planet's temperature. And he found that doubling the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere might lead to 5 or 6 degrees Celsius of warming. This estimate is remarkably close to the estimate that scientists still have today for the potential impacts of doubling the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. Then we have this gem from a New Zealand newspaper in 1912. They noted at that time that about 2 billion tons of coal was burned every year around the world. And they already knew burning this coal would produce polluting gases in the atmosphere, releasing about 7 billion tons of carbon dioxide each year. And they say this tends to make the air a more effective blanket for the Earth and raise its temperature. They thought that the effect might start to be notable in a few centuries. Unfortunately, we've been ahead of that curve, and the effects from carbon dioxide were felt within 100 years of this newspaper article. But it wasn't just scientists or newspaper readers who were aware of the influence that our polluting gases would have on the Earth's climate. Those organizations like Exxon and Shell involved in fossil fuel development were also well aware of this now for many decades. In 1982, Exxon had an internal scientific study. And what they found here, I'll walk you through it, is they were saying we're starting here in 1960, 1980, and it was right here around 315 parts per million. So on this side, we're measuring the atmospheric carbon dioxide. And in the early around 1960s, we had about 315 parts per million of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. Today, we're at roughly 420 parts per million in the atmosphere. And you can see that with this study, Exxon had already identified that with 420 parts per million in our atmosphere, we would expect an average temperature increase in degrees Celsius over here on the right of roughly 1.2 degrees Celsius. And in fact, today, the Earth is just shy of 1.2 degrees Celsius warming. So already in 1982, Exxon was well aware of the impacts of adding carbon dioxide and how that could change our planet's temperature. Shell had a similar internal report in 1986. Now, this Exxon report was not leaked until 2015, but within this report, Exxon noted that this might cause potentially catastrophic events. For example, we might see devastating sea level rise, or the American Midwest and other parts of the world could become desert-like, and that all of these things, in fact, might happen together. So scientists have understood climate change for well more than 150 years, and others outside of the scientific research community have also understood this for many decades. What does that mean for you? It means that active disinformation campaigns do continue, and they can make it seem to people that we aren't yet ready to act. But you can communicate that the science is well understood when it comes to climate. We know what the problem is, and we also have already identified a really wide swath of solutions, all of which can make a really big difference for our future.